Are you an aspiring Unity game developer who's looking for a tool set to help you save both money and time when building games? Well, let me talk to you. What's up, everyone? Antonio from Mega Power Games here, back live and bringing you something a little bit different. As I said in the beginning, I'm about to present you with a series of tools that I personally use in my own game development that should help you, the aspiring Unity developer, save money and time when you're building out your games. So before we get started, let's talk about who this video is for. And basically this video is for any Unity developer who wants to save both time and money when building out their games. The time and money are two of the greatest challenges any game dev will ever face, because there may either be not enough money to complete a project or not enough time to complete a project before a specified launch date. The bottom line is developers will seek out tools and libraries to help them save money, time, or both, or build out their own to assist them throughout their own development processes. A lot of these tools here are tools that have been used by game developers. They're all tools that I've used before, and I've used them to build a little game called DepowerBall. You can wishlist it on Steam. It's due to come out later this year. We'll talk about that in another video. But yeah, I mean, I've been working with Unity since version 1.5. I've seen the evolution of the engine from then till now. I've built a lot of unique classes to help me in my process, and I've used all of these tools to help me save time and money when it comes to building games. So hopefully there will be something here you like, and if there is, leave a comment below. Tell me what you liked, and I'll be happy to answer questions in the comments. And if there's enough interest, I can easily do follow-up videos on some of these tools and do a deeper dive versus the overview that you're going to see right now. So without further ado, let's get started. So the first part of this talk is going to be centered around open source, and you can't talk about open source without first talking about version control and what kind of version control system you want to use for your project. Plain and simple, it really comes down to two, and it depends on the types of features that you want that each platform offers that is unique to the other one. I'm going to talk about both, but either one, depending on what you want to use, should be viable for your project no matter which one you pick. When you're talking about version control systems, you can't help but start with GitHub. And up until recently, GitHub never gave you the ability to host private repositories for free. They only added it about 2 or 3 years ago, if memory serves me correctly. So if you want to take advantage of that and use private repositories to host your projects, GitHub is now officially a viable option. When I first started out building prototypes, that was never offered to me. Instead, what I ended up using was a tool called Bitbucket, which is entirely similar to GitHub, provides a lot of the same features on the free tier, and is just as serviceable and just as reliable. They both use Git, so version control, no matter whether or not you use Bitbucket or GitHub, it boils down to basically what's your preferences. They are both viable, they're both reliable, and in the end, it's up to you. You can't go wrong with either choice. One of the first libraries that I always import into my projects is Duetween, and as you can see here, you'll understand why in a quick second. It is an animation engine. It is a type-safe animation engine that is a lot more precise and a lot more efficient than using Unity's general animator, and that's because it directly modifies the numerical values of game objects within your scenes. It's free, it's open source, it works with every platform known to man that you can use with Unity, and it allows you to quickly do translation, rotation, or scaling animations very, very quickly. And I'll show you how quickly. I'll do an example for you right now. So as you can see here, we have this scene. There is a sphere in the center of the scene that's rather large, and I'm going to animate this sphere to shrink down, to scale it down to a smaller size. So we will open up the script that I already have attached to this called Scale Sphere. It's bare bones right now, so we're just going to quickly first add or import, Duetween, so we can take advantage of its functions, and then actually scale it down. So when you're scaling an object or using translations or rotations, you always want to touch the transform of the object itself. So you do this .transform.do scale, and then it allows you to set the value of the object to whatever it is that you want. So we'll set it to float, and we'll make the duration 1 second. So we'll save that. We'll go back to the scene. Once this completes, I will hit play, and you should immediately see the sphere shrink down to my desired scale within the span of a second. As you can see here, 222 within a second. It's that simple. And you can, and like I said, you can use this for any types of simple animations, whether it be on game objects, UI, text. It supports it all, and you will likely use this a lot. I'm not gonna lie. You can do a lot of simple animations with this and save a lot of time versus having to use the actual Unity animator. So for this next tool, I'm going to present you with a scenario that almost every single developer will face when they're using Unity. This menu should look familiar to every Unity developer out there. It's the build settings menu. And when you're determining what settings, what configurations you want to use for your builds, you go into this menu and you can manually click what scenes you want, anything related to your platform. You can go into your player settings specifically, change any settings here, change your script predefines, and then you're off to the races on your builds. It allows you to set predefined configurations for different platforms. So you have your client platform here, you have your server platform here. You can change the different scenes that you want for each one. But the problem becomes when you are testing different environments for the same platform. So for example, your client, maybe you want to test a development build of your game that has some scenes that you're still working on. Usually what you'll have to do is go in, change all the scenes manually to make that build, change the player settings to make that build, and then you click build. But that leaves a lot of room for error. Maybe you accidentally included a scene that you shouldn't have, or the opposite. Maybe you missed a scene for your development build, and now you're wasting time having to rebuild the project, especially if it takes 5 or 10 minutes at a time and you have a full project. That's a lot of wasted time. So there was actually a tool that was made to resolve these types of problems, and it's called Unity Build Settings Presets by Tel Roshan. It's an open source package that honestly, even though it hasn't been changed since 2021, it still works on the latest versions of Unity. I'm currently using 2021 myself. The last time it was tested was on 2019. All you need to do if you import this package is to just delete any lines that are deprecated. Those are basically the only changes you need to make, and then it'll work accordingly. And what it looks like is that you can create different presets here and check off whatever settings you need to check and add whatever scenes you like to add and change whatever script compilation defines you want to change. And once you make those changes, it adds it into this drop down menu, and you can click on whichever environment you want. So let's say I want to switch over to my playtest environment. The script will run, it will make all of those changes happen in the background, and then all you have to do is open your build settings, verify that everything is there. If you want to, you can verify in the player settings that everything is there, and this confirms it, and then you just hit build. It eliminates so many possibilities for error because it essentially reduces it down to one click. And let's say I built this playtest version, it looks good. Maybe I want to release some of these scenes in my demo version. I click demo, it will change the environment again, change whatever settings that it needs to change. And again, all you have to do once it's all done is go into your build settings, verify the scenes that you want, verify the player settings that you want. And again, the only real difference here is that there is a client demo predefined instead of a playtest one. But that shows that it's made those changes. I can feel confident, I can hit build, and I'll know that I'll get the scenes and the settings and the configurations that I want for this particular build without having to worry about it, without having to waste time. It's a huge time saver, and when you're dealing with multiple environments under the same platform, this is a must. Moving along, this should also look familiar to you. It's Steam. And any developer who's looking to release a game will likely release it at some point on Steam. And with that comes the ability to take advantage of some of Steam's features to include in your game, like Steam Workshop, Steam Achievements, etc. If you're using the raw Steamworks API for an inexperienced developer, that might be difficult. And there are a bunch of libraries that exist for you to capitalize on using Steamworks. But the one that I keep going back to, one of my favorites, is facepunch.steamworks. And, you know, it's another fucking Steamworks implementation. So, but the idea being is that it makes it ridiculously simple for any developer to use Steamworks within their game. They can allow you to view your friends list, to get app info, to get avatars, to get a list of servers, achievements, use voice, use authentication if you need a user to log in. There's a bunch of utility functions. You have Steam Workshop at your disposal. Steam Cloud is even available if you want to save some files to the cloud and allow them to use that. Steam Inventory is there. And to get started, it's simply a single line of code that allows you to initialize with your Steam ID. I mean, if you're planning on using Steam and you want to utilize any Steamworks functionality, this is the library to go with. It's reliable, it's fast, it works with every platform, Windows, Mac, or Linux, and it just works. It just works. Just use it. Just go use it. And there's also a wiki as well if you want to look up how it differs from Steamworks.net, which is the other viable option for you. And then it gives you a bunch of code snippets to help you get started. So it works. It just works. I've used it. I still continue to use it. Anytime I'm working with Steam, I will continue to use it. So you should too. Next up, I want to talk about some networking solution recommendations for Unity. But before we get into that, we first have to look into the past and talk a little bit about UNet. Back when Unity was a proverbial baby, they introduced UNet as this game-changing multiplayer technology that allowed Unity developers to create multiplayer games online. And so it provided a lot of useful features that you could have used and was supported for about 4 or 5 years before it was deprecated in April 2019 and would eventually be replaced to what is now known as multiplay. And once UNet went the way of the dodo and it wasn't getting any updates anymore, intrepid developers sought out to create their own open source solutions. The biggest and most popular one being Mirror. And the reason Mirror keeps coming up when we talk about Unity networking is that it's free, it's robust in terms of its features that it provides. It gives you a lot of documentation and examples that you can use and play around with. And it's been working for many years and people are satisfied with it. And it continuously receives updates as often as you would expect for a library like this. The last update that was made apparently was February 9th of this year. And so it's not the only solution out there. I also want to bring to your attention Fishnet, which is a networking solution that was released, I believe, within the last year or two. The developer used to contribute to Mirror and then created a bunch of extensions for a bunch of components, I should say, for Mirror that allowed players to get more out of Mirror that address some of Mirror's shortcomings at that time. And I personally have used those extensions and continue to use those extensions for my current projects, and they work very well. And now that this developer has created a full service networking solution, I imagine that it will be just as good as those extensions were, if not better. So if you're looking for a networking solution to use with your Unity projects, you can go with Mirror, you can go with Fishnet. My recommendation would be make sure that you pick a version to use and stick with it for a while, because especially with networking solutions, whenever new changes are made, you run the risk of breaking your current development environment and have to go back and fix all those mistakes. So pick a version, stick with it. This applies to any library that you use, but it's even more so important for solutions like networking and Mirror because of how much they can encompass your project. So go with either one. They should both work. I'm not going to do a deep dive into either one of them, but if you make a comment and want to talk about it a bit more, then I might produce some future videos specifically talking about networking and how I've used it in my projects and such. But yeah, can't go wrong with either one of them. Give it a try. So this next recommendation is along the same veins as networking. Let's say you're building out a Unity networked multiplayer game and you want to be able to test it locally. Normally, you would have multiple instances of the same editor open. You would test the game. Once it's done, you make your builds. You can then test it online. But there's one problem. If you want to open multiple instances of the same Unity project, it won't allow you to. Luckily, there's a tool for that, and it is called ParallSync. ParallSync is a top tier extension that allows you to test your multiplayer gameplay by having multiple Unity editor windows open at the same time. And it accomplishes this by making copies of the original project folder with only the necessary folders that are needed to build the project. So, what does this look like? Well, you open up your Unity project, you import ParallSync, and once it's imported, you now have a handy dandy drop down menu. If you click on Clones Manager, it will allow you to add new clones, which will just be duplicates of your original project folder with the clone suffix at the end of it. Once it's created those new clones, you can then open those clones and they will be available to you. Look at that. They will be available to you in order to use and test your local multiplayer or your network multiplayer gameplay on your local machine. And you can open up as many of these clones as you want. If you have a 10-player networked game, then if your system allows it, you could open up 10 clones of the Unity editor and just do all of your testing on a local machine. So it hasn't been updated, I think, for a while. At least it hasn't had an official release. But given that ParallSync is actually on Unity's own documentation as a recommendation to allow you to test gameplay, and then immediately says that it's not supported by Unity, it's an open source project, it works. And if you're building out a network multiplayer game, you absolutely need to have this tool in your toolbox in order to be able to test properly. So far, everything that I've presented to you is 100% free to use, but the grim reality is, as a developer, you will need to shell out a little bit of money to capitalize on the time savings you'll receive during your game development. Yes, I know. Okay, let it out of your system. Let's get to the first one. One of the biggest gripes for any Unity developer over the last few years has been its input system. And up until recently, their input system has been subpar at best. I'll give credit where credit is due to Unity. They've released a new input system a couple of years ago that seems to be a lot better than its old input system, but still seems to have its share of issues. So, what I want to present to you is a battle tested solution that has served me well over the last 7 years of Unity development. I mean, if I haven't made it more obvious, it's Rewired. Of course, it's Rewired. Rewired's been around for a very long time, and it is the most battle-tested, well-documented library I've ever seen for Unity. It's just good, and it just works. It does what it says it's going to do, and it works. One of its biggest strengths is that it makes it so that input is taken from the player and not the peripheral. So it's peripheral agnostic. So whether or not you're having keyboard input, mouse input, touch input, controller input, you can set up your profiles so that all you need to do is just check on the player itself, no matter what the peripheral type they're using is. It has a lot of support for different controllers, and it also has a lot of support for tested platforms for any of the consoles, touchscreens, the now defunct Stadia, it seems. It has a lot of integrations with many of the famous Unity assets that you know and love, and it just works. It just works. The developer is very responsive. If you have a concern or if you have a bug, they're usually responsive within a day. you really can't go wrong when it comes to a library like this, and it costs $45 US. Again, I echo what I said before. The new Unity input system has fixed a lot of things about the old system. So by all means, if you don't have the money to shell out for Rewired, try out the Unity system, see how well it works for you, see what those shortcomings may be. But if it doesn't, and you need something more robust, this is the beginning and the end of that conversation. Use Rewired if you need it. And very quickly, I wanted to give you a quick demo of the Rewired editor just so you can see what you're getting involved with here. As I said before, it's peripheral agnostic, and you'll see what I mean in a second. So you start off by defining the players, how many players could potentially be playing your game, and assign each player a default set of keyboard, joystick, custom controller maps. Those map categories will be defined here, and you can create those categories depending on where you are in the game, whether or not a player is controlling a character or UI or anything else, inventory. You can create different mapping categories to handle each one of those use cases. You can define actions that are assigned to a given map category, and you can then assign different joystick keys or keyboard keys to those actions in order to reference them in game. So in this case, you're not referencing the key binding itself, you're referencing the action that it does. So instead of saying, key code.k like you would in Unity's input system, it would be something like reference jump or reference dash or reference shield. So it keeps everything peripheral agnostics. No matter what peripheral you're using, you can define it within the editor, and it should be a seamless integration into your game. This extension is highly recommended for anyone who's making a 2D game in Unity. It has become much easier in recent years to use the Unity engine to make 2D games, and any time that you want to create fancy camera effects like in all the AAA games, you would have to do that all yourself. But with this extension, it becomes very easy for you to enable any sort of camera effect you want, adjust some configuration settings, and then you're off to the races. So, for example, something like a pointer influence, which would normally be more complex to develop on your own, you can enable that extension in Pro Camera 2D and then just go ahead and use it. Maybe you want to add cinematic effects. All you need to do is enable the extension, and then it will allow you to adjust whatever configuration settings you want, set whatever waypoints you want, and then toggle, and then allow you to run cinematics by allowing the camera to follow those waypoints. There's many different extensions. I'm not going to go through every single one of them, but if you want to use it yourself, all you have to do is download the library, attach the extension to your camera, enable or disable any one of these camera extensions here, and then that component will get added. You can adjust the parameters to whatever you're liking, and then use the effect how you see fit. Normally, it costs $40 on the Unity Asset Store, but there are a lot of flash sales that the developer participates in, so very likely, if you time it right, you can get it for a lot cheaper than that. Highly recommended for anyone who creates 2D games in Unity. It works very well, and you're going to have a lot of fun playing with these effects. So what happens once you release a game? Obviously, you want to make sure that your players have the best experience possible, and in order to do that, you need to be proactive in terms of figuring out when errors occur and how to be able to fix them quickly, because if you have an unhappy player base, they'll revolt against you. You see it happen all the time online. And crash reporting and error handling and error reporting, those all need to be handled automatically. And luckily, there's a tool that allows you to detect and manage those errors and crashes without having to solicit players to provide you a player log, and that's Backtrace. I've used Backtrace for a few years now in my development, and it's very useful in providing all of the errors and crashes that may occur in my game into one handy dashboard that I can just go in, have a look at, and be able to debug on the spot without asking players to provide me details of any crashes that occur. It's free to use for a single developer, so if you're a solo dev or a solo programmer on a development team, no brainer, this is something that you should be using. And if you make a game that really takes off, you shouldn't have an issue providing the price, paying the cost of utilizing their standard services. So this is what the dashboard looks like. And so anytime that there's an error in your game, it will provide you with, a fingerprint, how many times this error has occurred, when it occurred, a little brief description of the call stack, potentially a classifier that just says, oh, okay, well, it was a null reference exception or an invalid operation exception. And then once you click on any one of these, you can do a deeper dive into it, explore the call stack in greater detail, and it gives you everything you need to be able to debug and fix the game right from the dashboard. And you don't have to solicit any players. You can check it at any time. There's probably some email monitoring that you can do anytime you get a new set of crashes that will notify you. It's a very useful monitoring tool and highly recommended to anyone who intends to release a game and to follow up on any errors or crashes that may occur after release. So to conclude this talk, I wanted to bring you a way to dramatically save time when you're building out your own custom components and assets in Unity. It's 2023, so I think you know what I'm about to say. I mean, of course it's AI. What else would it be, right? You knew this was coming if you've been paying any attention to the state of software development in the last few months. ChatGPT has become probably one of the most powerful tools that a developer can use to assist them in creating anything that they want. And thankfully, it actually has some useful in-depth knowledge about Unity, so you can use it to create custom components and extensions for your development purposes. So what I wanted to show you is quickly a use case that I developed in about 5 minutes for something that I wanted to use within my project. So one of the things that I wanted to do was come up with an easier way to increment the version of my game before I make a build. And I just wanted to create a drop-down menu to increment either the major version, the minor version, or the build version before I build the game. So I asked it, can you create a drop-down menu in Unity that allows me to increment the version of my build automatically? And it gave me this script. Now, it's not perfect. I didn't specify what my versioning scheme was, so it made a lot of assumptions and gave me a drop-down menu that allowed me to select from a list of build versions that were predefined, and then would allow me to, like, once I select the version, it would replace it within the player settings itself. Useful. If you didn't specify anything, you could be content with the script like this, but I was not. I wanted something more dynamic, more robust. So I gave it some clarifications. I gave it a versioning scheme, A.B.C, where A equals major, B equals minor, and C equals build. And I wanted to create a menu dropdown that would allow me to increment either the major, the minor, or the build version of that string when I click on it and set that version in player settings. And then it gave me this. So it built out some menu items under build increment version major, build increment version minor, build increment version build, and then provides the function to increment that value. So it takes the A.B.C string, splits it into 3 parts, increments the part that you specify, puts the string together, and assigns it to the bundle version. But again, it's not perfect. It still left this array in here that is no longer needed, so I called it out on it. Build versions isn't being used, can you remove it? It said, yeah, you're correct, removed it. And now in the span of less than 5 minutes, I have a handy dandy version increment script that will allow me to increment a version of my build without having to manually change it in the player settings. I can just do 1 click, then build, and I know that the new version is there. I could take this a step further and then have a script done automatically to do it, but for the purposes of this, if you are a Unity developer and don't know how to use the editor class, you would have to spend some time reading the documentation to do it, which would take you anywhere between a half hour to a couple hours, depending on what you wanted to do. The basic premise is it's going to save you a lot of time if you know what the right questions are to ask as a developer, and ChatGPT can generate these types of scripts very quickly, very easily for you in order to customize your own development experience. And there you have it, folks. A lot of cool tools that I've shown over the last little bit. Hopefully, you've got something out of this. And if you liked any of these tools that you saw and want to learn more about them, leave a comment below. I would be more than happy to create more in-depth videos about any of these tools or libraries if there's interest in it. So it helps us determine what kind of content we want to create in terms of game development with Unity. Leave a like, share this talk with anyone who might be interested. Subscribe to the channel. Could always use more subscribers. And don't forget to wishlist DepowerBall. I used all these tools to help build it, so wishlist the game. It's coming out later this year. There'll probably be another video on it at some time in the future. But yeah, hopefully you all enjoyed. And until next time, until the next update, take care.